Hey everyone, Peter K here, aka Trendcrusher. Welcome back to another interview on the Metal Wanderlust. And this time we're mixing things up. We've got American doom metal act Qaalm. For those of you not familiar with Qaalm, well, while you're listening to this, scroll down in this article and check out the link to Joel's review of their debut album Resilience and Despair. He gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Pretty good stuff, huh? So, when he spoke so highly about the album, I jumped up the opportunity to speak to vocalist Pete Majors. Yeah, his name is Pete also. We talk about that, we talk about their debut album Resilience and Despair, doom metal in California, a lot more. Here's my chat with Pete Majors. And I'd like to welcome Pete Majors. How's it going, Pete?
Very well. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's kind of odd because I never really, in all the interviews I do, end up like sharing the name with the person I'm speaking to.
Yeah, it was kind of funny when I was reading that too. I was just wondering, I'm like, wait, did they put me down as Peter? Because I often get Peter, even though I go by Pete. I'm like, oh no, the guy's name is Peter. Cool.
So yeah, I'm glad at least these rare coincidences happened today. But first of all, how are you doing today?
Good. Just finished a fun, beautiful day working outside in the mountains, and I was looking forward to this interview today.
Awesome. And I mean, the reason why we're talking is Qaalm released their debut album, Resilience and Despair. And even though it's just been like over a week or so, I have to ask you, like, how do you feel about the response to the album so far? And the reason I'm saying this is because the website, the Metal Wanderlust that I write for, the editor Joel rated the album 4.5 out of 5. So,
wow, yeah. I mean, honestly, I've been overwhelmed by the response. I don't think I thought it would be like this. I was overwhelmed by just how many reviews were out there, and how people really seem to take the time to listen. Where I think that might be maybe the first obstacle in this record on the surface when you see 4 songs and you see the length of them. For someone to engage and to focus and to really write a thoughtful review, and then to have so many of them come out and to have them to be very flattering, it was a big shock, because this isn't for me. I didn't think this is the kind of music that would necessarily invoke such a response, at least from critics.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to dial back about the album length shortly, because I have a few questions around that, and I just want to understand, just like from the musician's perspective, right? But let's just, like, for a lot of people who have no idea who Qaalm is, and when I was looking, all of you come from like different bands, right? You've got Henry from Act of Defiance. I believe he also played in Seven Sisters Asleep. You've played in Harasser, Dargar for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read up, actually, the whole band kind of came together when you met Henry. So if you could just take us back to that moment and fill us in on how the rest of the members joined the band.
I had known Henry for a few years after he had moved to Los Angeles. We had this idea about starting a band together, and we specifically had this concept of it being like kind of an epic doom metal band. And I think when this was first just kind of thrown around, there wasn't necessarily the plethora of doom metal bands that we're seeing these days. It really seemed like more or less like unknown, uncharted, at least in the West Coast. This band's being far between. So the concept was, and from there we went forth to try to find participants. And that's changed over time. I think the first incarnation of the band, or our first attempt to play with other people. The first bass player that played with us away. My wife had played with us a couple times. She is a guitarist. And then we took a little bit of time, and then we reconvened with some other people. And then it's kind of evolved from there. Just, people that we know, people who are interested in playing this type of music, just kind of inviting them in and seeing how it goes.
I have to go back to something that you just mentioned, right? That in the West Coast, there's not a lot of like doom bands, let alone like epic doom.
Yeah.
Does that make you all kind of just like stand out like a sore thumb?
Well, I don't know. It does seem to me like there are a lot more doom bands than there used to be, within how many metal bands there actually are on the West Coast. There does seem to be more doom bands. I think we probably stand out more because our influences have always, they've been informing our music and how we write and what we like, but it hasn't really been a copy of something that's come before us, that we really tried to make something different and engaging, that was all the qualities of the members participating in the sound we create together.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say it, because when I was thinking about also like the West Coast, right? I mean, yes, there is like, your New York death metal sound, and you've got like West Coast being known for, and especially because of the proximity to the Bay Area, so you had a lot of like thrash, and then I think there was a retro thrash movement that kind of came across, right? So I was kind of thinking of like, would you say just, and this is just like arrow in the dark kind of thing, because, and I'm going to contextualize it, right? Like for me personally as a listener, when I've lived in places where there's warm weather, it's kind of hard for me to listen to black metal, right? Because how do you expect like those like frost-bitten riffs or whatever you want to call it, right? Would you say it would be something similar with doom? I mean, I'm just trying to think.
Well, not necessarily. I think your surroundings, your environment, and certainly you could say the weather could inspire such things. But I think if you already have a taste for this, the climate isn't necessarily something that's going to be at the forefront of why you listen to these things. I think for everyone in the band, we love so much music, and this is from all genres of extreme metal, to, we enjoy country music, and for some of us, electronic, avant-garde, experimental, noise, and a lot of things like that. So I think our influences, in the sense that we are such fans, was always there. But the sunny weather of Southern California didn't really play a part in it. And when you talk about doom, I think you say like black metal and icy and those kind of riffs. I think doom for us probably comes more from our personalities and our demeanor, a way of an outlook on the world, where I don't think a lot of us see a lot of hope for the human race. We try to make our immediate situations, happy in the worlds we live in. But this is definitely an outlet for us to get this out, where we're not positive people.
Yeah, and that this is one of the things that actually stood out in the press release that I got, and I'm actually going to use a quote that Henry is attributed to, which says, "Resilience and despair is a record that should be experienced as a whole. It's an epic journey into the cruel uncertainty of life, and at the same time, a symbol of strength amid adversity." Now, yes, I think that kind of encapsulates what you were talking about. And take us to that kind of mind space that you were in. I mean, like, I know since Henry and you are the primarily members of the band, and I'm guessing you've written some of the lyrics in there, right? Like, take me back to that statement that you made, that like you don't necessarily have like a positive outlook.
Well, I think music, for me personally, is something I'm compelled to do because I will have such a negative view of people or people in large groups, or the way we seemingly just kind of consume and destroy this planet and our world around us, a selfishness that humans have. So this is a outlet for me to get those emotions out there, and in a way that probably helps me survive, because having that outlet makes me makes me a better person, makes me an easier going person, makes me a more considerate person, a loving person, because this is a way for me to get that angst out.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and the only way I can kind of relate to what you're talking about is it's kind of hard not to talk about the last couple of years, especially when you're talking about this kind of music, right? Because
Sure.
I remember when the initial part, I think the first couple of weeks when here in India we were hit with the lockdown, it was severe. Like, it was just kind of like overnight, everything was kind of shut. And I went from like meeting people on a regular basis to now feeling that, a city where I'm guessing our population is close to like the entire population of certain states in the US. Desolate.
Yeah.
It was like a ghost town. And it's very uncomfortable, right? And the only thing I attribute to getting me through that entire time was just listening to various bands. And there were some bands that I related to far more than the others in there. So like when people talk about like music having the therapeutic aspect to it, I totally agree with that, right? It's just because that's something that you can do. So I kind of understood where you were coming from, at least with that aspect, right? And I must come back to a statement that you made, because I want to understand at least your approach to the album now being, I mean, let's be honest, it's 4 songs, 70 minutes long. Like some of the songs are like 18, 20 minutes long. When I was comparing, I was like, one song is equivalent to probably like a death metal or grindcore album, right? So take us through that. I mean, I know there would be a certain purpose behind the way you kind of did that, right?
I think initially within these songs, that these were mapped out with demos that Henry had done. So there was already a certain amount of length within the demos before other members came in, and we fleshed these out and made changes and kind of made them to what they are now and what the album is. I don't know if it was ever talked about that they were specifically going to be that long. I don't think we were against that, as long as it was engaging enough within the slow pace and the tempo of the songs, that they weren't going to be boring or repetitive in a dull way, that this was still going to have a certain amount of excitement to it, that you weren't going to feel lost, but you were going to probably be pulled in more. So the length itself was nothing ever really talked about, other than, again, that this was probably something that it was there within some of the demos, and then we just then fleshed those out and made them into what they are.
Okay, fair enough. Now I must kind of ask you, because your approach to the music is so like counterculture of sorts, because in India now TikTok is banned, but I believe TikTok is like taking over the US, and the way it's working is
very popular.
I believe that there are certain artists who are now creating music specifically for TikTok, so it has to have that kind of hook, that 30-second thing, the way you can do
that short attention span. Yeah.
And so when I look at a band that releases an 18-minute track, I was like, they absolutely are just throwing out whatever's happening in mainstream culture and saying that, you know what, we're going to do it our way. Have you ever thought, and as a musician, have you ever thought about like how a listener would kind of experience it, or it doesn't matter for you, honestly?
Well, to me, it's always exciting that someone enjoys it. Where the impetus for the creation of it was probably from a more selfish standpoint, where this is something I like and I enjoy, or that we enjoy, and you certainly understand that this isn't for everyone, that this is so far from pop music, or even in the
Yeah.
sense of a lot of genres of extreme metal where songs are nowhere near that long. I think for us it was a satisfying thing because we enjoyed it. So in a sense, yeah, I mean, there is a bit of a fuck you to the idea that people can't sit and pay attention anymore, that people need to have things very short and sweet, and that's not us.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have to be honest, right? This is an album, at least personally for me, it's a headphones album.
Okay.
And just like, because there's so many layers and the atmosphere to it, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
just need to like soak that in up over multiple listens. And I think that was the beauty of the album, right? Is that just the way that you all went about crafting it. It wasn't, how do I say? I mean, okay, let's just put it this way. You didn't take like the first wave of black metal production kind of view, right? You'll actually kind of have
Oh
purposely
no,
kind of
yeah.
added different things to there, which is really nice. I mean, that's why I say it's a headphones listen, right? Because you can kind of spend time ruminating through it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of layers to it, and yeah, I don't think on a first or second listen you're gonna catch everything or absorb everything, and that is a real big compliment. If these songs um, can bring you back for multiple listens, where you're still interested and curious, where you're discovering elements to the song that you didn't hear the first or second time, and the fact that the length of it didn't deter you from going back, but if anything, you were pulled back in because it was engaging you in some kind of like oral way. So yeah, that's all very flattering to us. I mean, we set out to make something interesting in that aspect, but I don't know if we expected this kind of a response. So I do appreciate you saying that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I was listening to another interview of yours, so I definitely have to ask about this, right? I mean, you talked
Mm,
about the lineup changes, and
yeah,
I have to bring it up the lockdown and everything again, because that's when you all were kind of recording the album. And I believe your
yeah,
drummer switched in the middle of recording.
yeah. The drummer who was in the band at the beginning of the pandemic and lockdown, we had already begun tracking for a full length record after the Reflection Stout demo had come out, earlier in that last summer. Um, I, I think there was things pulling people in a lot of different ways, creatively, personality, conflicts. But that in and of itself was part of the commitment of the remaining members to record and complete this record, to see it through fruition, because we weren't going to hold us back, and that in sense is why the album is called Resilience and Despair, because it was so dark, um, with the themes, yet our commitment to each other and our focus to make this record was that strong.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about it, that's like not the easiest conditions to kind of, especially put out your debut album, right? Like when you've got lineup
Yeah,
changes, you've got all of this,
yeah,
like as if nothing else is wrong with the world now. Even like in your immediate circles, things get hard. Uh, but
yeah.
so I have to ask. I mean, just like now that it's been a while since you've kind of since you've recorded the album, how do you look back at the entire experience, right? I mean, have you had time to just kind of soak in and look back at, oh my God, we actually did this?
Yeah, it was a positive experience. The recording process through a lockdown and, just that kind of isolation, businesses closed, a lot of us just unemployed, just forced unemployment through this, pandemic. This was the shining light that kind of guided us, that the one thing to look forward to go to the studio and to be luxury of time, in the sense where we weren't like on the clock in the way we were trying to create this record or pay for this record, that we really could take our time to enjoy the process. I don't think that happens very much, because, most of the time when you're recording a record, the world isn't just shut down. So the camaraderie with us and the members of the band, and Steve White, who recorded the record, who actually also did session drums and is the drummer on the record. It really brought us together in a unique way, a profound way that I don't know if that would ever really happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I'm seeing with a lot of the music that released last year and this year, right? I mean, some of the bands actually never had a chance to actually go in the studio. They've in their own home studios remotely recorded. They've never actually jammed on the music. So until they played like live gigs, they had to learn the songs
right.
itself.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of gave them their own unique, experience for the album. But I actually read in an interview somewhere that you used to work at Amoeba Music at the music store.
For a very, very long time. I actually just quit this month.
Oh, wow.
I had two stints there. I started there in early 2002. I used to work for Rasputin Music in the Bay Area, and that's also where Amoeba started. And there was a bit of a rivalry, I think, between those two, big giant independent record store chains. So I had moved from the Bay Area to start in the new Hollywood store in early 2002, worked until early 2009, and then participated in another independent record store for nearly 4 years, and then ended up coming back to Amoeba. But now I'm just, I've been a record store guy for like 25 years. And I just really felt I had recently moved up into the mountains away from downtown LA and Hollywood. And I'm just trying to embrace a different way of life right now, without this constant obsession of record collecting or that retail culture.
No, fair enough. And but I'd just love to like dig into you, because I have to be honest, right? I mean, as someone who lives halfway across the world, and Amoeba does that great section, what's in your bag, where
that's very
you
cool.
actually see all of these musicians do it. And so it's kind of built that kind of image in my head that if I ever make it to the West Coast, like no matter what, I have to go there, just because all of these musicians and all go there. And I wanted to just understand, right? Like, being a musician working in the retail, you talked about the commercialization. You probably have seen the rise of vinyl, right? From something which people were like, what is this, to now like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What's that been like?
I mean, it was really bizarre. As I started, I started at Rasputin's in 98, spring of 98. And I was born in the 70s. And at that point I was in college at university, but I did grow up with records, and then, very much got into cassettes and the convenience of the whole Walkman lifestyle, and that kind of freedom and independence that, having music mobile like that brought you, other than just having like a AM FM radio or something. So when I started at Rasputin's, I embraced vinyl in a different way, because it was kind of bizarre to me that it still existed, and that it still had such an audience. And I wondered why. And I literally confronted it, where I got into it because of my coworkers and the environment that I worked in. And I realized how much I enjoyed it because of, kind of the cliche things that people say about vinyl. Just, the warmth of the sound, the difference, with, the levels, you don't have the same kind of like compression and floor and the ceiling and the limitations that digital has, or at least had, before it was perfected, or depending on how good your stereo system or equalizer is. So I would buy records that were like my very, very favorite records, things I'd listened to thousands and thousands of times, and I was hearing them very differently. And that was kind of exciting for me, because music has always been that kind of guiding voice in my life, that kind of savior to me. That was, it wasn't ever a background thing. It wasn't just for holidays. It wasn't just in the car. It was something I lived and breathed. So getting into vinyl at that time, I really embraced it. And that was kind of a really brilliant time to be into vinyl, because it was before this new explosion, or right before this explosion. And then as that happened, you kind of thought like, well, geez, when is this bubble going to burst? Like, records were just going up in price so quickly. And this is even in the early 2000s. Now we've seen what's happened in the last 20 years. So it doesn't seem like this is just a trend anymore. It does seem like people have really embraced this in opposition to streaming, to digital, or I still love tangible digital formats. If you like movies and you want Blu-rays and DVDs, and CDs are still really cool, and they're actually fairly affordable in the face of what vinyl costs and production of the of vinyl. So I don't think it was foreseen by anyone. CD had been king forever. And this has just been growing gradually through the years now, to see it where it's at now.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, right? Because especially what's happening in the last couple of years, and the more I see it, where bands are like, you know what, and even some of the labels, when they say that you need to like look at 6-7 months in advance, and
that is the reality. That was even for us with Resilience and Despair. I can't remember exactly when we approved test presses. It might have been as early as October, and the records are shipping right now.
Wow.
And that, and that's without knowing that there's going to be a pressing defect or something that happened. That's just approving, all 4 sides of the 2 discs that make that double LP. That is the demand for it right now. So yeah, it does take a lot of time and a lot of money to press something on vinyl, which I think in the 90s, the way it was a dying format was something that was embraced less by, punk and metal, definitely experimental artists, as more of a DIY thing that other people just didn't really give a shit about anymore. But you could still do it, and you could do it affordably. That's obviously changed now.
I'm going to dive back to your record store experience in a second. But since you mentioned it's 2 LPs, is there like a separate cut or different versions? Because how do you have, so it's 1 song per side of the LP? Is that how it is?
Exactly. Wow. That's what it is. I think, for a 33 1/3 RPM press, you're looking at around 20-22 minutes. You could push it more, but you're going to sacrifice quality to an extent. So the longest song, I believe, Existence Asunder, is about 20 minutes, which actually used to be longer. But they're exactly the same on the record. The CD on Trepanation from UK, Trepanation Recordings, that has a bonus cut of the video edit of Existence Asunder. It's just like a little extra thing there. But there wasn't much else we could do with the vinyl other than 1 song aside.
Yeah, and the advantage of CD is you can have up to 80 minutes. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you might as well do it. I have to ask you, right? I mean, so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you also worked as a record buyer. So has there been any experience that you've had in your 2 decades of, say, a certain band that kind of just blew up in front of you? And I'm sure this would have happened with some of the imports, probably. Any experience you'd like to share?
Oh, Wow. So many, I've watched so many bands get famous, you know, from nothing, whether they were local bands that I knew or had seen, or just a band that was hungry and, you know, worked hard. Yeah, I couldn't even think of an example. There's so many. I've watched bands. I mean, when I really was embracing music in the late '90s, to the point that I really didn't I didn't have my own thing anymore. I was really open to jazz and experimental music and indie and punk, and I loved emo, and I was extremely enthusiastic about black metal and extreme metal and death metal, and just, you know, a thrash kid growing up. That I was just excited about everything that I could get my hands on and whatever I could learn, and just getting engrossed by everything that was out there. But a couple of the bands for me, late '90s, when I got into Sun, right when Sun first started, and also Boris, and a
Wow.
little bit through the way of Sun. Those seemed a little bit obscure. I can remember seeing Sun in like 2002 at Spaceland in Silver Lake, you know, Los Angeles, basically, and there was like maybe 30 or 40 people there. It wasn't what it is now. And Boris, for that matter, I never thought Boris would go into some of the directions they've gone, or seem the kind of success, or, you know, just accolades that they've had in their career now as they've been around. I mean, they've been around for, you know, nearly 30 years.
Yeah.
But in the early days, they just seemed like such an obscure band. And this in the pantheon of heavy music and kind of heavy avant-garde or stoner rock, or some of these things that were just, they weren't the champions of metal music. You had your eras of thrash metal and death metal, and then, you know, even into black metal, and some of the success and acknowledgement that those scenes got. But in some ways, the slower music, the stoner music, the riffy music, it always seemed outsider to me. And maybe it's through internet and technology and accessibility of some of these things now with younger people, that you know, there's no limitations. You know, people can find their own niche and what they enjoy about heavy music now, without having it being marketed or sold, or a scene, or, you know, a city that they come from.
Yeah. And I think the internet can directly be attributed to a fact that you're sitting and talking to someone halfway across the world in India, right?
Right.
But
Right. Yeah.
but coming back to the Boris example, I still remember listening to their album Pink, and the disadvantage of living in this part of the world is you don't get access to music. That's why I've been asking you all these questions about working at a record store, right? Is you don't get access. Like, early we had cassettes, which were far and few, and then CDs, which were like far more expensive than we could afford when we were teenagers, right? And going to school and college. So a lot of times when you had, you know, illegal downloads and stuff like that, that was the education or the way you'd kind of dive in. And I remember downloading Boris Pink through a recommendation of a friend. And it blew my mind, because I was like, who are these guys, and like, how have I not heard this? And then you just kind of go down the rabbit hole and realize that, oh my God, they've been around for so long. So I totally understand what you mean when you say like how they didn't at the start get. And I mean, it would blow my mind just to think about like discovering them at the time that you did.
Yeah, I you know, hearing heavy rocks and Flood, for me, it was mind blowing. You had Flood, which was, you know, a lot more kind of atmospheric and experimental and psychedelic in a droney way, where Heavy Rocks was just really just balls out, just like rock and roll riff record. And they were so different. And those were my first two. And that, you know, there's always an intrigue that this is also these band. I often found as you know, an American or a Californian, that some of my favorite extreme music, or the most interesting extreme music, was coming from Europe or Japan.
Yeah. And I think, that if you think about it, outside the States. Europe, of course, is a huge thing. I keep
Yeah.
having a chat with UK bands that, you guys are like the birthplace of metal, and look what's left with kind of thing, right? Because they keep talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when it comes to Asia, I don't think anyone can rival Japan.
Yeah.
Now you talked about this in terms of like moving to the mountains and kind of having a change. Has that had an impact on the kind of music that you listen to? I'm very curious to know what you're listening to at the moment.
Oh wow. I'm such a fanatic. I tend to way too many Bandcamp accounts from labels and bands alike. So I always have like 50 tabs open on my computer of stuff that maybe I listen to it for 10 seconds, I listen to it for 10 minutes, but I have that like FOMO that I want to hear everything that's coming out. There will always be like my classic bands, and I'll go through certain things, certain times and periods where I'm just going through catalogs of bands that I've always loved or enjoyed, revered for a long time. But right now, yeah, I'm constantly interested in what is coming out. Even if it's a reissue of something that was available before in whatever format. The fact that someone's putting it out now and hyping it, I'll take notice, especially if it's from a label that I already respect. And that can be part of alliance in these things where you really love from a label. Now you're just going to listen. You'll discern what is for you or not, but you will give it the time of day because it was on that label, and that's kind of the opening the door for you in a way for things. That's allowing your mind to be like, okay, I'm already open to this because so and so is doing this, and I love so and so.
Yeah, no, I think that's what's happened, right? And a lot of times, the question is asked is, okay, what's the purpose of a label in 2020? I think you kind of encapsulated it well, right? Is that's sometimes just the starting point for someone to kind of discover or know who a band is.
Yeah, I mean, labels will obviously curate what they do, and some of them will be far-reaching in terms of what they release. It could be a lot of extremes, but it's always interesting, when pre-internet, all the shit. Like when I was a kid, it was on to what what did your siblings turn you on to? For some people, they have who would play certain things, and I was always jealous hearing these stories. Like, oh, my folks would play Floyd and Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stones, and now I'm like, wow, I didn't really have that. I was the kid who was like in front of MTV with a boombox, like recording a music video and like just super shitty quality, just so I could play the song over and over, or waiting on the radio for a song to be played to record it on tape. So it's just interesting now that you can get turned on to things so much easier because you don't have to wait for the radio or for a friend to tell you about it. It's something that you can actually go out and seek out even easier than it ever has been in history. So that's kind of fun. And appreciate people who really are curious about music and put the time in to find what they want.
Yeah, I mean, a true test of how well you could actually record off the radio was how close you got it to when the announcer was like, and this song is, because they'd always play like that opening riff or something, they'd be talking over it, or that intro, and you'd just be like, So I'd have like a few tapes where you'd actually hear the announcer in there, but over a period of time, I got better at it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of want to wind down our chat by asking you a couple of things. What's next for Qaalm? I mean, you've got all these accolades, reviews, and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine watching you guys live, and that'll be like some experience. I don't know.
That's a good question, and honestly, with live, I like to think so. I'd like to think that we're entertaining and engaging as a band in the energy and how we present ourselves. But where we're going right now, we have a solid lineup. We have been writing music, and there are similar qualities to Doom, but we are not simply just trying to do the same thing again. There's been a lot of new riffs and ideas, especially from Henry and our drummer Dave Ferrara, and that's exciting for me. That we never said we were just going to be one thing and kind of regurgitate that in a way. So we want to play live. We want to support this record and see where that can take us. We have an album release show coming up on Sunday, May 8th at Permanent Records. The music store, label, and venue, Permanent Records Roadhouse. Other than that, we're interested and excited to see where this energy takes us. We want to tour. We want to see where people want us to go. That's just exciting to me to see that someone actually wants to come and see us play. And who knows where that could take us to Europe to play something like Hellfest or Roadburn or Bakken or something like that. Fucking amazing. Can we go to the East Coast? Can we go to South America? I'm into it. I'm open.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Roadburn, because I had to stay away from Twitter and social media over the weekend because of the Roadburn updates.
Oh God, what an epic year after 2 years of not having it. Walter really outdid himself. So many great performances. I was kind of like stuck to it, and even just photography of just still shots of some of the live performances, and then hearing just, Thou just did a show with Lingua Ignota, and you're just like, what? Like, I mean, I've never been. I've always wanted to, and maybe my first time ever would be performing. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be totally awesome, because one thing I really like about a festival like Roadburn, right, is that there's certain performances that only happen at Roadburn. So like you have to kind of be there. So hopefully next year I'm going to save up some of my money. But I just want to quickly go back to something you said in terms of the material, right? And you've said this in a previous interview. That's why I had it as a question or as a note marked, is that you said are not sticking to the epic doom. Is that what the future material is going to be like?
Well, I don't think we're abandoning it in any sense. I think we are allowing ourselves, with our lineup now, with our drummer Dave Ferrara, to create something that's also unique, that's interesting, that's the sum of the parts, of the people participating involved in the band. Never to be pigeonholed in any one style. I don't think we're going to start writing short pop songs. In fact, some of the things we're writing right now kind of just blow my mind. So there's still going to be the elements of doom. There's going to be elements of Swedish thrash and death and post rock and just everything that we all love about music, and trying to make something that's uniquely our own, but not just another record of the same thing.
Okay, that sounds good, and I think that's the thing as a listener, right? If it's going to be the same thing again, then you might as well listen to AC/DC, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's always like a damned if you do and damned if you don't for a band. People love a band for something, a specific reason, a sound, maybe one record, a breakout record. And then there's a whole group of people that just expect that to happen again. And then there's also a large contingency of people who are like, well, fuck, they did that before. Like, what else can you do? and if you do something different, then people are going to very much judge that against what you made before that was more popular, or accessible, or for whatever reason that people got into something. So it's never easy as an artist to have a path already kind of set out for you. I think you just have to follow your emotions, your energy, and where that takes you.
Wow, I don't think there's a better way to end this chat than the way that you put it. But I'm gonna indulge you and say, for all those listening, how do they reach out to you, the band? If they've enjoyed this conversation, how do they pick up Resilience and Despair?
You can grab copies of Resilience and Despair, physical copies, through Hyperetheral Records for the vinyl, for the double LP. At Hyperetheral, I don't even know the URL website, but Hyperetheral Records. You can find that on all of our social media sites. Trepanation Recordings in UK put out the CD and cassette. So look that link in all of our social media, from our Instagram and our Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. So yeah, if it touches you and you do want to support, physical media is the way to directly support bands these days that you want them to keep going.
Awesome. So thanks so much, Pete. It's been
Peter.
A pleasure talking to you, and
Totally,
I wish
man.
you all the best.
You too, brother. You have a good one.
And that was Pete Majors of American doom metal act Qaalm. As always, do check out their music. There's a link to their debut album, Resilience and Despair. If doom metal is your jam, you're definitely going to enjoy this album. As always, keep an eye out on the Metal Wanderlust for more chats like this. Follow us on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm at Trendcrusher. Follow me on any social media. I'll see you soon with another interview. Cheers, everyone.